Hello, everybody. Very excited to have you all here join us and excited to showcase this very impactful and very damaging threat vector that has been taking the cybercrime world by storm. Today, we're going to show you a truly eye opening live demonstration. How bad actors can fully take over your phone remotely in real time and cause some serious damage without the victim even noticing. I am talking about Trojan malware. And Trojan malware remains one of the most insidious cyber threats. It often masks itself as legitimate software while covertly granting unauthorized access and full control to the attacker. In this session, we will walk you through the life cycle of such an attack, from the infection point all the way to the exploitation stage, highlighting how this seemingly harmless APK file can wreak havoc on an unsuspecting user's device. So, the threat vector we are talking about today is remote access Trojans, or for short, also known as rats. And it has become one of the fastest growing malwares in the dark web community because it easily allows attackers to remotely control the infected devices, and therefore enables them to steal data, monitor activity, and execute commands. Now, hackers typically disguise Trojan malware as something you want, whether that's an application, a program, or even just a simple download. The purpose behind it is that they need you to install it on your computer voluntarily. The rat may be hiding in a phishing email, a torrent from the internet, or even just an enticing web link. Now, rats have evolved to a point where they're being offered as part of a malware as a service. And rats are easy for cybercriminals to obtain and to customize for specific targets, and even develop more advanced variants to evade detection. And the idea behind this is they need to or want to prolong the duration of the attack and the extent of the damage. One question we always get asked is, how big is the Trojan impact? And if you look at the screen here, Google Play alone has more than 600 million malware downloads in 2023. Now, if you think about it, that's 600 million in a single year. And that doesn't even count the malware downloaded outside of the Google Play from the likes of phishing emails. Now, this type of threat vector typically has been around since the beginning of time. But what has changed and continues to change is the sophistication of deployment and the extent of the damage. And because of that, I want to focus on these two pillars. Pillar number one is how it's deployed. Now, this step still requires the victim to take action like many other things. And like I mentioned, whether that is to download a file, click on a suspicious link, or even grant access to an unknown application. But the deployment factor is much more impactful now. With generative AI, cybercriminals no longer face challenges in, composing the emails because of language restrictions, or even in designing the look of how the deployment mechanism should look like, and therefore automating the social engineering aspect to a certain extent. But pillar number two, when measuring the extent of the damage, we start to truly realize the impact of this threat vector. Think about giving the keys to your house to a thief. The same idea applies here. The cybercriminal will not stop with the victim, but rather they will collect additional information from the device, including things like the contacts, the messages, and everything else to further widen their pool of victims, especially when we're talking about utilizing trusted sources like the Play Store on Android devices. So today we will show you how cybercriminals use rats to take control of your privacy, your identity, and take your money and even blackmail a victim for potential ransom. But before that, allow me to quickly introduce this workflow to you. The workflow is simple and very quick. We will walk you through a real world scenario and a very popular approach through phishing emails with a proposed urgent Chrome security patch update. And what that does is it tricks the user into downloading a malware installation file outside of the Google Play Store. After the malware installs, we will then show you how much control the cybercriminal has over your Android device in real time. Real quick, if we look at the control center and what the control center looks like, or the command center, looks very basic, doesn't it? And we'll spend a lot of more time focusing on this. But before we do so, I want to quickly go over the file that was sent and show you how it looks like. So as you can see on the screen here, as I mentioned earlier, phishing continues to be the most common type of cybercrime. To quote one of the most prominent figures in cybersecurity, Bruce Schreiner, when he said the human link is the weakest link. Now, that statement goes beyond just the individual. Think about it this way: we are only as good as the support we offer our teams. Organizational support is very important because we need to equip our front lines with the right technology and right processes in place to be able to fend off financial crime. Now, what you see on the screen is the phishing email. Leveraging generative AI and a little bit of HTML manipulation, the victim now sees an email with the same look and feel of a real Google update. Once the user clicks on the update now, they will download a Google Chrome patch APK file and execute it thinking it will patch their browser. But instead, their phone is now in full control by the cyber criminal. So now that we have a good understanding of the impact of this Trojan, let's have a look from the cybercriminal's perspective and see what it is that they're actually capable of doing once they take over a phone. What you see on the screen right now is this command center. The command center allows you, or allows the cybercriminal to monitor all, and I mean all, of the phone's activity. As you can see, we know the victim is in the United States with this specific IP address, using a Pixel 7 device, and even their battery percentage and their Wi-Fi connection. And there's a whole slew of other capabilities on the right-hand side here that we'll dive into. But for starters, if we right-click on this victim's device, we see a drop-down menu with a lot of different options. What do these options mean, and what does it allow the cybercriminal to do? Well, for starters, if we hover over the manager section, we see a subsection now with another drop-down menu of the potential access that they gain, including things like the victim's files. Now think about it. We all download certain files on our phones, whether that's our pay stub information, our lease agreements, our mortgage documents, and so on and so forth. This gives the cybercriminal access to those documents to use at their free will. Additional to that, and where things start to get even more interesting, is we see a section for SMS. Now, we all, have very private information that we share over text messages, with friends, family, even coworkers sometimes, and even private conversations that we have over text messages. This gives the ability to the cybercriminal to monitor for these SMS. And not only monitor, but actually be able to send text messages to further widen their pool of victims. We also see a call section. Now with this, again, it allows them to make calls, outgoing calls to your potential family, relatives, friends, you name it. You can also potentially access the contacts, download different applications, and enhance permissions if we need to. So this is the start of how they collect more information on the victim and on how they can potentially widen their pool of victims. Now, if we go over to the monitors section, this is where the real work starts. As you can see, there's another drop-down menu where they can start screen monitoring. And we'll get to that in a little bit. They can also do screen read. They can also monitor for your camera, monitor for your phone, or sorry, monitor for your microphone, keylogger, and that's one interesting piece that we'll dive into a little bit. They can also access your live GPS, see where you are currently, and cater their attack based on where you are. If they need further information from you, they can, hit you up with a text message and say, "Hey, I know you just left your house. I need some help." Blah 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 blah. They can also access your web browser history. They can access or record conversations that you have via calls, and they can again do what's called an auto clicker, and that enables the phone to click certain things at certain times. With the admin section, this is for them to further widen their access if needed, or escalate their privileges if needed. They can even lock the victim's screen if they want to lock the victim out for a short amount of time. Now, typically, this happens overnight when they suspect that the victim is sleeping and they need to go about conducting their attack. They can lock the victim's screen and go about it so the victim doesn't notice. Now, having said that, I must emphasize as well that when the cyber criminal is active on the phone, a lot of the times the victim is unaware because they don't see it on their side, and we'll get to that in a little bit as well. Now, as you can see, there's a tools section as well. They can call numbers from here. They can open certain links. They can show certain messages, have the ability to copy certain information if needed, and download other APK files if necessary. Here, they can do a call listen. They can access the phone information. And here, they can restart the connection or block the client if needed. But starting off, I want to see how this camera section looks like. So if we click on the camera monitor here, and this is the screen that the cyber criminal sees, we can choose if we want the back camera or the front camera. So let's hit the front camera and see what we see. As you can see, that's me. On my end, or on the victim's end, you cannot see that the camera is active. So you can go about your day having conversations with your loved ones at home, and you have no idea that you are being monitored. Once we click out of that, we can then again go on microphone monitor. With the microphone monitor, you guys are starting to hear, and not just the phone as well, and not just through the recording. To mic, if I was to mute my mic, now all you hear is my voice through the record. And start to record here. I got the microphone when I want. If I leak, I can even back to the victim if I need to. Now, what is impactful here, especially now we know with generative AI and the expansion in the generative AI space, specifically with deepfakes around both facial swaps and voice cloning, this is a very damaging attack vector. Because they have the ability to record the conversation, they can take that audio and generate a synthetically cloned voice from the victim, make an outbound call using the cloned voice to your friends, to your family, to your brother, to your sister, to your mother, and further damage them in a certain way. So, with all that said, what happens if we start, or if we click on this little phone icon on the right-hand side? As you can see, this little screen pops up on the left-hand side. This is the phone, again, from the perspective of what the cyber criminal sees. On the victim's end, we don't necessarily see any changes on the phone's main page or any activity that would potentially deem this to be, some sort of compromised device. Once we hit start, now we're seeing what the victim sees on their screen side by side. So this is our command center. This is what the cyber criminal has access to right now. And that's where the victim's screen currently sits. We can start manipulating things. So we can move. We see that the victim has a WhatsApp, a Snapchat, a Tangerine bank account, and so on and so forth. We can access their Google Chrome browser, access their camera from here or photos and so on and so forth. Again, from the victim's perspective, nothing stands out yet. But in this instance, let's go on their Gmail account and see what information we can pull from this victim. Ooh, okay. Well, I see an email right there. Interesting. This looks like it's an email from the victim's brother where they highlight certain information about, the need for bank statements and, proof that they didn't lose everything on the NFT. This seems like an ideal email for the cyber criminal to start collecting additional information. And what do you see here? There's a passport photo as well of the victim's brother. In this case, without the need to further expand on this, the cybercriminal can take this photo and use it for their malicious purposes and intent. But it doesn't just stop there. They can potentially even email the victim's brother back from the victim's email and ask for additional information, banking, information, wire information if they need to, additional funds to be transferred somewhere else, and so on and so forth. Now, let's hop out of Gmail. Let's go on their photos. Interesting. So I see a couple of photos here that we can use for deepfakes, right? There's a photo of the victim. There's a handsome looking guy. Picture of their social security number. Picture of their house. Another picture I can use for deepfakes. But imagine if this was a real device of a real victim, what kind of sensitive information, sensitive photos would be present on the Google Photos app? Get togethers with their families, pictures of their children, pictures of bank statements, screenshots of bank statements. I'm guilty of that as well. I always take a screenshot of certain things, screenshots of wire information, and you get the idea. The idea is we are very much social beings. We document a lot of the things that happen in our life, and some of this information that can be on these applications are very sensitive in a sense. But having said that, what else can we do here? So now that we're looking on this side, I see there's Snapchat. We all know all the very beautiful photos that everybody likes to take on Snapchats and the relationships that we all have on Snapchats, the friends that we keep in touch with on Snapchat. Again, this is something that they can use to further widen their pool of victim, conduct some sort of spear phishing attack, because now they have the information they need to specialize or cater their attack to that victim. Now, one other interesting thing is we are all users of digital banking. We all have our applications of our bank on our phones. We use it to conduct a lot of the transactions, send transfers, make payments, check our balances, and so on and so forth. Now, what's interesting is not only can they view your screen, so in this next step, we'll be logging into the banking mobile app here. Well, what's also interesting is if we initiate the keylogger, and now the keylogger is something that captures every click, everything that the victim inputs into their phone. In relation to what we're trying to do, this gives the attacker the password information, the username information, where they don't have to necessarily capture it as you're putting it out. So let's go ahead and initiate this keylogger. So let's go ahead and initiate this keylogger. Now, if you guys remember, I told you if we go in the monitor section, we can initiate that keylogger. How does this keylogger look like? As you can see on the screen, there's an online keylogger that logs every click and everything that the victim would input at this time. Once we hit start, then we can watch the victim go on their mobile banking app. First, let's go grab the client number that we need. And this right now, the victim is logging into their bank. They put their information here. As you can see here, it's logging in the text 879-72917, and it tells you everything that you need to see from the cybercriminal's perspective, including the Windows change, and so on and so forth. From there, the victim continues to log in, as you can see, and now it's asking for the PIN. The victim is inserting the PIN and logging in. And as you see here, the keylogger also logged that PIN, and now the cybercriminal has the access to use that PIN for anything. They can log into your bank, and then they can start focusing their attacks on other platforms that you use. Because as you all know, we all use the same password for a lot of the different stuff that we access. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We tend to use the same passwords. Now, as you can see on the screen, they have full control of the victim's banking app. In this instance, it looks like all my money was stolen right now. So, too bad for the cyber criminal. There's no money to be compromised at this point. But like I said, this was able to log all the keystrokes for the banking app. Now, additional to that, if we go back on the victim's screen, like I mentioned, we can even access WhatsApp and start sending messages from there. Um, and, access the photos, as I mentioned, access the calls, and so on and so forth. Now, with that said, I want to emphasize on something here, strictly from a financial institution fraud perspective. Cybercriminals can capture the conversation with my banking institution. This helps them in a couple of ways. One is they understand the bank's authentication process and then they can identify vulnerabilities. But two, they can also clone my voice using specific phrases used during my conversation to sound more realistic. Think about it like this. When we're conversating with a bank, we say specific words like account balance, transfers, savings, checkings, all that can be used to clone the victim's voice, and those specific words will sound very much realistic. Hence why it's very important to deploy voice biometric detection, and more importantly, understand the effectiveness of how well they perform. To conclude here, the message that we're trying to get across is very simple. Attack vectors like remote access Trojans continue to advance with easier deployment and sophisticated code. So we have to do the same, not only with adopting the right technology, but to really understand the nature of these attack vectors and where the technology fits in this piece. Because of that, we also always emphasize on the need for consistent penetration testing, or what they other call as well fraud red teaming. Demonstrations like these or specific attack vectors like the one that we just showed allows financial institutions to understand where the gaps exist. And because of that, they can start to potentially fill those gaps and enhance their detection mechanisms to further prevent or mitigate as much of these attack vectors as possible. Now, what's next for rat attacks? As you can all imagine, if now with the power of artificial intelligence and the power of Anthropic's Claude desktop AI, bad actors combine these two technologies together and have a massively scalable remote Trojan attack that is fully autonomous. As fraud fighters, we experience a lot of challenges. Challenges externally from cyber criminals, but also internal challenges between the different fraud teams on what we can do, what we can share, and who takes responsibility and ownership, and of course, budgetary constraints. But we must march forward and we must march forward together. Thank you for your time.